people delivered a mandate. Gone are the days of weak, feckless, America-last leadership from the Oval Office. The American people are sick and tired of the radical left forcing its woke policies into every facet of our lives.
Worst year in American history for illegal border crossings.
It is inhumane to have a border open like this.
President Donald J. Trump is working tirelessly to implement the America First policies that you demanded. And I'll be by his side all the way.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, there's a guy. It's tough.
America's golden age has arrived. It's time to make America great again.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Biggs, Congressman from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. Welcome back to another of our semi-regular podcasts, What's the Biggs Idea? I am so delighted to have with me today Brandon Arnold from the National Taxpayers Union. He's a fiscal policy expert, and he is the Executive Vice President of NTU. He works closely with lawmakers on tax reform initiatives and has testified on fiscal policy before Congress. And additionally, Brandon has appeared on television outlets such as Fox News and written for major publications such as Politico and The Hill, amongst many others. So our topic today, and it's really in relationship to the 250th year of the founding of our country, but when we think of historical things that have happened over time, a lot of people won't necessarily mention this, but I will. We had essentially the largest. Would have had the largest tax increase in American history if we had not passed the Working Families Tax Cut. And so, Brandon, let's just talk about that for a second. What would the impacts have been on the working family had we not passed that particular piece of legislation?
It would have been absolutely devastating. I mean, so many Americans right now are struggling with affordability. But if you tack on thousands of dollars in higher taxes for the average family, which is what would have happened, it would have been so much worse. People really would have been devastated. We would have seen higher rates of delinquencies on mortgages, auto payments, things like that. It really would have been a catastrophic scenario in terms of our overall economy, but more specifically for the average American family. So thank you to you and your colleagues for locking in some of these lower tax rates that have really helped people keep their head above water in some tough economic circumstances.
Well, I mean, that's a great summary of it. I mean, because the way I thought of it, and I'll pass it back to you, Brandon, in a sec, but the way I thought of it is that primary effect is going to be direct, and it's going to be your taxes are going to go up, and all of a sudden your microeconomy gets squeezed a whole lot. Like you said, maybe you can't keep paying your mortgage. That's now out of reach. Maybe an auto payment. Maybe with healthcare costs as high as they are already, maybe that adds additional pressure. But it seems to me like there might have been like a secondary, tertiary effects as well. And so I wanted to ask you about that. So when I think about it, that was for the working person, the working people. But what about this? What about for jobs and small businesses that might have been squeezed out a little bit themselves? So maybe people can't get raises. Maybe they can't. Maybe they even have to terminate employment in some cases to stay afloat as a business, and that would have had a wider spread impact on the economy. What's your thought?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You talk about some of the pro-business provisions in there, and you're right. We do want to make sure we're putting families first, but at the same time, we got to make sure that those working families have jobs to go to. And one of the provisions in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was the big tax bill that passed in 2017, was a 20% deduction for small businesses, for pass-through entities. This could be your local barber shop or restaurant. These small businesses that are barely squeaking by in many instances, as many of them have to compete with much larger entities. This 20% deduction was enormous for these businesses, allowed many of them to survive through the pandemic, through some really tough sledding. and it was scheduled to expire. So that was one of the things that was absolutely critical for the small business community. And listen, I'm not here to beat up big businesses. I like all businesses. I like all job creators. And this had some really good incentives that, again, were continuations of the 2017 law, absolutely critical to job growth. Things like cost recovery, which is a kind of technical term. It basically says if you're making investments in the US economy, if you're investing in capital, growing your business, buying an extra factory line or what have you, that you can immediately write off the cost of that investment for tax purposes immediately. That really is such a powerful incentive, because as it stands, companies would have to write off those costs over the course of many, many years, sometimes many decades. So now you get that immediate write-off. That is a huge boost for capital investments, for building new structures, for, again, investing in the research, development, capital, all the good things that we want to see that lead to job growth for average Americans.
I agree. I'm glad you went into more detail on that, because I think it's so important. Look, the American dream isn't just about buying a house. It's about having a job so you can afford to buy that house, buy that car, be able to take your family on vacation, live in a safe neighborhood, get the education for your kids. I mean, the American dream um, is not to have a confiscatory type of tax policy that makes whatever you're doing, you're always squeezed. Am I going to have to make this, or you're making trade-offs? I mean, life is full of trade-offs, but your government should not be imposing those through fiscal or tax policy, in my opinion. And so I appreciate what you just said. And let's talk about a couple of these very interesting provisions that President Trump advocated for and that we passed. I mean, I think no tax on tips. That's really an interesting, I don't know, policy that I thought I would never have thought about that. No tax on overtime, right? And within certain limitations, no tax on Social Security. So, what do those do for, let's say, those blue collar workers that are called upon to either live mostly on tips or on overtime?
Yeah, one thing I think is really important to know when you talk about the total tax package, oftentimes the first question, I'm sure you get this from your constituents, the first topics that people bring up are, what about this no tax on tips? What about no
Yeah.
tax on overtime, the senior deduction, things like that. And I think that really speaks to the president's salesmanship in this bill, because just simply re-upping the 2017 law during a time when the Republican majority in both the House and Senate is so narrow would have been tough sledding, really. But to have a little bit of an additional political impetus behind it, to have that sales pitch behind it, to show we're doing something new, we're doing something different, and we're doing something that speaks to blue collar Americans, average Americans here that are working those overtime hours, that are earning tips in tough jobs where they're on their feet all day, carrying food back and forth to tables. We're speaking to those people. This is not just about corporate America. It's about the entire economy, from the lowest rung of the ladder all the way up. And I think that really spoke to what President was trying to do here, what Congress was trying to do here, and it resonated with the American people.
Yeah, hey, Brandon, let's talk about that for just a second, because I think you're right. I mean, you look at it and you say, those are hard jobs. A lot of people working overtime, man, and especially when the economy gets tough and you see a business that says, okay, I probably should hire somebody else. I can't afford to hire somebody, but that's a full 40 hours. But maybe this person can work, 8 to 10 hours more per week, and I have to pay them more, but they might get bumped up to a new bracket or something like that. Be a bad deal for them. So this was, I think, really quite an incentive laden policy that I'm kind of excited about. And I wanted to ask you, what other types of policies might provide those same kind of incentives going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about tax provisions that affect the, middle class, working class Americans. I think one of the things that's already in the bill was, frankly, increasing the standard deduction. The standard deduction before the 2017 law was a little bit north of $12,000 for a married couple, for a family. and it's now almost $20,000 higher than that. You talk about the standard deduction, that means that up to over $30,000 of your earnings, those first $32,000 in earnings, are completely tax-free. That's absolutely huge, and I don't think we talk about that enough. And that's the kind of the tax policy that I prefer, are these broad-based tax policies that benefit everybody, no matter what your profession is. So I would caution against kind of seeking out particular folks that are facing particularly strenuous jobs or so forth. Let's provide as broad-based tax policy as we possibly can, so we're not biasing the tax code in favor of one profession versus another, no matter how hard folks are working. That standard deduction, I think, not only got the tax man off the back of so many Americans, it also paves the way, I think, for bigger reforms, for fundamental tax reform, as we're moving people away from itemizing their taxes into the simpler 1040s, where they are, have a much easier time filling out their taxes every April, and lower taxes along the way too.
Wow, that's a lot of benefit right there. But I mean, I agree with you. I love the notion and the idea that we're going to have a generic, broad-based benefit for everybody, and it really isn't. It's not a real hard thing to visualize that we're going to say, no, you can earn this much before you ever have to start taking, pay taxes on it. That's income taxes. That is a great thing, and I love that as well. So I think that too many states provide too many specialized benefits, and look, that's why our tax code is that thick or something like that, is because there's so many small loopholes or small this or small that because we just continue to layer on and layer on instead of reducing and eliminating that. And so that leads to that great idea that you were just talking about. It's been around for a long time. Do you remember there was a proposal to turn your tax return into a postcard, right? I mean, that would have been interesting to see that happen, but that's really what we're talking about. And that individual tax code, and maybe we should be doing that for businesses too. I mean, what's the impact? What would that impact be if we actually did that for businesses as well?
It would be absolutely tremendous. I mean, right now, Americans spend, National Taxpayers Union, we actually crunch these numbers every year. Americans spend about 7 billion, with a B, hours completing their tax forms each and every year. That's businesses, that's individuals, that's everybody. There's a tremendous amount of dead weight loss. That, I mean, it may be good for tax attorneys and for accountants and so forth, but it's really bad for the average American who has to, just absolutely agonize every year over their taxes, for businesses that have enormous and costly headaches that they're faced with to complete their taxes. So moving to something like a flat tax or a national sales tax, something that would be easy, straightforward, that people can do, without agonizing over it, would go a long way to eliminating these dead weight costs, to reducing stress, and to increasing economic efficiency, which I think leads to more jobs. Maybe, again, fewer jobs for accountants, but more jobs for just about everybody else. So I'm a huge fan of tax reform. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think that standard deduction, having a standard deduction that's much, much higher, so fewer people are relying on these individual credits and deductions that litter the code now, I think that tilts the playing field in our favor, because when you have fewer people using these tax credits, you have a smaller constituency of folks that are saying, oh, don't get rid of these credits. They're helping to lower my tax burden. They're not doing as much work as they used to. So I think the time is right to get rid of some of these various credits, just reduce the size of the tax code, make the tax code make a lot more sense and be easier for the average American to comply with.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I like that. And imagine, I mean, because a couple of things you were talking about, you said less money that you have to pay professionals, less stress that you have in your life. And what that means is, I mentioned the American dream earlier, actually, it facilitates the lifestyle, a better lifestyle for more Americans. And that is part of the American dream, is the lifestyle that we have, independent, individual, being able to accomplish whatever it is that you set your mind to. and it gets government out of the way. So all of those are really beneficial. And that leads me to this other area that I wanted to ask you about is as we see that with the U.S., do we become more productive? Do we where what how does that impact us globally in the global economy as we simplify our tax code um, and actually reduce taxes?
Yeah, it would help us a ton. You think about the entrepreneur, the people that go out that are creating new jobs, that are dreaming up innovative new businesses and ideas. These folks are entrepreneurs. They love what they do. They're passionate about what they do. They want to see their businesses grow. They're not, for the most part, really that interested in spending hours upon hours
Mm.
filling out tax forms, going through the bureaucratic paperwork that the IRS imposes on them. They want to focus their time, energy, and resources on building their business and doing what they love and making this country better. The more time we're taking them away from that task and making them focus on the bureaucracy that the IRS forces down their throats, the less they're able to do what they love and what's good for this economy. So yeah, let's get the IRS off folks' backs. I think you, as Congress, has done a good job. The president as well, scaling back some of the excesses that we saw during the Biden administration, shoveling tens of billions of dollars to the IRS to harass more and more Americans,
Yeah,
families,
right.
owners, you name it. I think there's more work to be done there, reforming the IRS, reforming the tax code, making sure that the IRS works for the people, that we're not working for the federal government or the IRS. And I'd encourage you to continue down that path that we're on to make sure, again, we're protecting the American dream here.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I think about the IRS far too much, and I think most Americans think about the IRS far more than they'd ever like to. And imagine a world where we funded all the federal government, uh, and we did it in a way that the IRS was not meddling in everybody's life so much because I hear it particularly as a member of Congress, and we have caseworkers, and that's what they do. They end up they spend most of their time dealing with the IRS trying to resolve issues that come from overreach or misinterpretation or whatever else it may be. So and it gets back to the point that I guess I would make is if we actually reduce the size of the IRS and we reduce the tax load a little bit, a lot of people don't talk about. I mean, we all know that we've got a $2 trillion structural deficit roughly every year. A lot of people don't realize that when you reduce that tax load, the velocity of the economy spins faster, and that means money's moving faster. And when money's moving faster, you actually have more revenue within your tax stream than you otherwise would have, especially when you have the bureaucratic stasis and sclerosis, the sclerotic nature of what we have going on. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of the reasons why the economy is strong. Particularly coming out of 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Until the pandemic hit, I think we had a rip roaring economy. It's been a little bit sputtering now, and I think there's a number of reasons why I think that's the case. But because we had solid tax policy that injected more money into the private sector of the economy, where we get growth, I think that's been a boon for economic growth for sure. What I'd say is the other side of that coin, and you referenced it, is the structural debt that we have. We can't borrow $2 trillion a year and expect this country to reach its full potential. So that's the thing that I think is absolutely critical. If we can reduce spending here in the United States and get our budget closer to balance, that actually frees us up for better tax policy, for more pro-growth tax policy. We're a little bit constrained right now because cutting taxes heaps more debt on the future generations. It disrupts bond markets, which can alter investment flows away from the private sector and toward government securities. So, I think if the debt was a lot lower, and I know you're working on this on the Hill right now, and hopefully we have a lot more members that are rowing in the same direction that you are, if we can reduce that debt burden, not only would that make our country more sound just as it is, it would also open the door to more pro-growth tax reform, which would make us even better off.
Yeah, that's the shorthand way of saying it is we'd be more prosperous. There would be more people who could accomplish and achieve more. I mean, let's face it, the U.S. is perhaps the richest country in the history of the world as it is. Um, but you'd give more people more opportunities, in my opinion, if you had these pro-growth, you talk about pro-growth tax policies that would indicate that the government has been right-sized. I think the federal government particularly, is not right-sized. It's massive, and and I didn't want to get into regulations, but I mean, if you think about it, it regulates everything from the nails that go into the drywall in building a house to what constitutes a real ketchup and the flow of ketchup down. It just regulates everything, and that's why. And we have so many crazy policies, and we just keep building constituencies of bureaucrats in Washington D.C. and I'm excited because I think the tax policy that we did, as states adopted. I mean, in Arizona, they just adopted it after the governor vetoed it 3 times. Finally adopted this program, and in so doing, I think it's going to help Arizona's economy as well. And that's the beautiful thing about this. It's going to, I think, actually make us a more prosperous nation. And I'll close it out and let you have the last word. And I just want to tell everybody thanks again to Brandon Arnold from National Taxpayers Union joining us today. So, Brandon, I'm going to give you a last word on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up state policy, which I think is really instructive for the federal governments. States that are really booming right now, where you see a lot of economic growth, are states like Florida, like Texas, states that have no income tax for individuals.
Right.
Not only have they right-sized their tax code, they're spending on a per-person basis half of what some of these blue states like New York, California, New Jersey are spending. So if you get right on the spending side, you can open the door for pro-growth tax relief. And that is what really stimulates the kind of job growth, the higher wages that we want to see for our workers, for everyday Americans. And I think there's a lesson to be learned there for the federal government, too. If we can get our budget under control, we can have that pro-growth tax reform,
right,
and we can have that same success story as businesses continue to flock to our shores away from other countries and our rivals across the globe.
Well, Brandon, wise words. So let it be written, so let it be done. And appreciate you taking time and joining me today. And to those listening in, thank you for joining us. Please join us again on our next edition of What's the Big's Idea. Brent, just so you know, Brandon, I don't have any social media for you. Do you have any social media? Do you?
Just the NTU account. I got off social media a couple of years ago, thankfully.
That's why you're looking so young and healthy. That's the way
yeah, maybe so.
And for me, you can go to on X at Rep Andy Biggs AZ, or on YouTube at Rep Andy Biggs AZ 05. And with that, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon when we're doing some more stuff on good tax policy.
Thank you.
Thanks.